Normally Skeptical, Parenting Through Nonbelief.
We're a married atheist couple raising two wonderful, strange children. We ask big questions, dissect weird parenting moments, and examine how society ignores or misrepresents families like ours. If you're any stripe of non-believer who's involved in raising children, welcome. You are our people.
Our kids have heard all our swears, but yours might not have. So be thoughtful if there are young people listening with you.
Hello, moms.
Hey, we're going to break the rules today. Because we're going to start with an interview and end with a story.
Man, will Jesus ever forgive us?
So, stick around because I have a little story about Jaeger for the end. But we had the pleasure of speaking with Steve Ghikadis, and he is a humanist officiant, a public speaker, and an award-winning author. He wrote Humanism from the Heart. He is an ambassador for Humanist Canada and Recovering from Religion, and is just like a lovely presence in the humanist community.
Yes.
Steve, thank you so much for being with us.
And happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. That's the big 40. So I'm feeling it.
Yo,
sure.
baby.
Yeah, you are. We're so far past that. Let's see. So great to have you on the podcast. And I had such a good time reading your book. But before we get to that, would you feel comfortable sharing your humanist superhero origin story, how you got into this whole world and talking about this stuff?
That is a really good question with a very long answer. So I'll try and keep it as short as possible. But basically, I would say that I've always been a humanist, but I just didn't know the label. So I I was not raised religious. I was baptized Anglican by my parents, but my mom kind of raised me to be a freethinker. She allowed me to, experience everything firsthand. She never, forced me to pray or to look for answers anywhere. So I had really a free experience to be able to go to different churches, synagogues, mosques, things with friends, and just see the whole experience for what it was, which is, humans trying to tell the origin stories or trying to figure out our place in the world. And it wasn't until I met my wife later where religion kind of became more of an issue because her family and she's was Christian, and I considered myself to be an atheist at the time. I guess looking back, would be like somebody who didn't care about religion. And I was just more interested in like the human experience. So I think, at that time when I was going through the Masonic Lodge, which was a promise to my grandfather. Yeah. And it's a very Christian organization. It doesn't seem like it from the outside because they say, oh, you have to just believe in a higher power. So I was like, I guess when I go under power lines, I guess there's a higher power than me. But no, when I got in, they were like, they kneel you down at the altar and they say, who do you put your faith in? And they whisper in your ear, in God. And I'm like, in God with a question mark, and it was kind of like a weird experience. But at the same time, I learned so much about Christianity and the Bible because all the stories and everything in the Masonic Lodge are all acted out in play form, but it's all biblical stories.
Wow.
So I was able to kind of learn the Bible, which is really cool. And at the same time, I met my wife and she was attending the same church that the Masonic Lodge was kind of part of. And I'm like, okay, maybe there's something to this. Spoiler alert, there wasn't. But, I did go with her and her family to a lot of church services, and they had no idea that I was a non-believer because I just went along with the passing the plate around and singing the songs. And they had no idea that I was a non-believer. And then at our wedding, at the reception, her parents said, we're so happy she met a man who believes the exact same thing she does.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, shoot, because I'm like, now I feel like a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Yeah.
Which I had already kind of felt like that anyway, right? But it's like, now it's all right in front and center. Like everyone's thinking I'm something I'm not. So I actually lashed out and I became a very angry atheist. And I think that I was more mad at myself than anybody else, just for duping people into thinking I was something I wasn't. So I started burning a lot of bridges really badly. And, my marriage was kind of in I wouldn't say in crisis, but it was very, very rocky for a bit. And when we were about to have our first child, it was like, okay, I need to find a way to build the bridge again and ensure that we have a stable family for our children. So I started looking down the path of like Anthony Magnabosco, watching the videos on street epistemology. I reached out to him. I reached out to Dale McGowan, who's also an author with, secular parenting and bridging gaps between people. And I developed a method of, having cordial conversations and bringing back the infrastructure to build the bridges that I had burned. And, that's kind of where I was like, okay, well, now that I've done this for myself, how can I help other people that are in the same boat? So I started volunteering for Recovering from Religion. And then that enabled me to kind of expand my scope on what I was doing for at home to a wider audience of people who now are also benefiting from that. So then when it came time to share that, I started sharing it on a blog called Excommunications, which was on Medium through Recovering from Religion. And then everyone was like, oh, these are really helpful stories. It'd be really cool to have these in a book. And that's kind of the origin of where the book came from, which I can get into later if you want, like how the book came about. Sure. But that's basically the origin story of how I came to know like where I was in the world. And then at that point is where I discovered the word humanist. And I thought that label and what humanism is really defines me as a person.
So when you talk about humanism, like, what's your go-to definition? Because we've talked about it quite a bit on the podcast, and I just think it's one of those interesting ones where, like, everybody has a slightly different flavor.
Yeah, and it's cool because I'm an officiant, a humanist officiant, so I can do weddings and funerals and things like that. And I think in the U.S. they call it a celebrant.
Yeah, I got my thing. Yeah, I haven't done anything with it, but I just on a lark got my credentials.
Okay, no, awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, in Canada they call it officiant, so someone who can officiate weddings and things. But when I was going through the training for that, they said come up with an elevator pitch for what humanism is, so that if you get a disgruntled grandparent who's like, well, what is this non-religious thing you're talking about? What is humanism? Then you have something to kind of present to them. So I always say it's a non-religious philosophical worldview, which puts the emphasis on human dignity, compassion, empathy, and uses scientific investigation to come to as close to truth as possible. Now, that's just something that you can use as like a jump off from, right? There's so many different ways you could go down the thing, and it's very nuanced. And I also find that sometimes I'm a little bit controversial because I also extend the grace of using the word humanism for people who have a faith background. So it's not necessarily that it's an atheist worldview. It's more of a philosophy, whereas like religion is a separate thing, right? And my wife would consider herself to be a Christian humanist or humanist Christian because she does believe in a higher power, but she focuses all of her time and money and effort on the here and now and the people that are around us. So I think that's where I can kind of, give the grace where people can use that term as well. But as long as you're following the principles of humanism above your religious dogma, then I can consider you a humanist.
Yeah, I think that's how I've sort of thought about it too.
Yeah.
Because
it's where the rubber meets the road. It's like you can believe all these things, but when you actually take actions in society, what do you choose to do? Yeah, exactly.
And it's a lot about the integrity too, right? Because it's like doing the right thing even behind closed doors.
Yeah.
I find is a big part. Of humanism is, making sure that you're always consistent with your approach. And that's not to say that, certain situations call for different actions, right? Like sometimes the most moral thing you can do is something that might seem immoral and on a small sense, like, even like telling somebody off or something like that, right? It's like maybe that's the most moral thing to do in that situation, even though it's not a moral action, if that makes any sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I love the go-to that I hear counter-apologists use about Anne Frank, where like, so you mean like the Ray Comfort thing? Oh, so you've told a lie, so you're a bad person. Well, I mean, would you tell a lie to keep the Jews alive that you have hidden in your basement, or you tell the Gestapo the truth? Like where like it's all based on context.
Yeah, for sure, and that's the same thing. Like I kind of put that in my book, and I also, my kids have brought this stuff up before too, and I say to my kids, like, is it ever okay to steal? And they're like, no, it's never okay to steal. It's like, okay, well, what if someone's having, a heart attack and the IED machine is inside a store window? What are you going to do, right? And then
break the window.
Yeah, you're going to smash the window. Yeah. And and my oldest son, who's an empath, basically, he's like super kind and always wants to do the right thing. He's like, well, I would pay for the window, and then I would also make sure that I pay for the machine because it's been used and now it can't be issued a refund. And
kid needs to have like a notepad so that way he can do like IOUs on the spot and just drop it. Sorry, here is my number.
I totally see him doing that for sure.
That is wild.
So funny.
But it's kind of, it's the right thing to do. Like if somebody is in distress, or, regardless of your relationship to them, and you have the ability to help them, but you need to do a thing that might violate property rights, then what's more important? Is it people or property? Like, it has to be people. Like, we're like fully in the throes of, as we say, like, what? End stage capitalism. And
I was just going to say, you might want to talk to him about which business's window he broke and how much money they would have to replace that machine with no problem.
I mean, some businesses, you just steal from them, it'll be okay. No IOU necessary. They deserve it.
And if it happens to be a business that is like in the business of helping people, they might even just be happy and give you an award for doing that, right? Using their stuff. But who knows, right? But that's where I find like the nuance is great, like the gray area, right? Because you get a lot of people on all sides of the equation that are black and white thinking. And black and white thinking is a really, really scary place to be, because there's really no nuance and there's no way to kind of analyze each situation as they come available. And people are just going to make a choice based on what they think is the right thing empirically and not think about the here and now on the ground.
Yeah. I think that it goes back to earlier stages of our evolution, as well as, like how we see patterns in agency in natural events. Oh, there's a rustling in the bushes. I have to act as if it's a predator, or there's a good chance that I would get eaten, even though it might just be like a rabbit. How do I know? I have to say, oh, rustling in the bushes is always bad.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that those humans that survive passed on those genes.
Oh, yeah.
And that's
now we have to deprogram it.
Yeah. And there's a lot of, study out there to show that like our evolutionary history did not account for where we're at today, especially technology wise, right? Like our brains are not developed enough to go through all the different nuances that are in the world.
You
right
mean
now.
social media is bad? Oh, somebody tell Nick Fuentes.
Oh, geez. Oh.
Oh my goodness. So we've talked about your book a little bit, which is Humanism from the Heart. And you already sort of mentioned, could you tell us a little bit about what led to you writing that? And
so that was I started putting things together on that the blog that I was mentioning earlier, and it was little snippets of my life that had happened, things that like anecdotal things that had happened to me, and how I was able to overcome issues, how I was able to work with people with different backgrounds and beliefs. Because I think that's probably the most important thing to focus on is, we're not going to come to an agreement on where the universe came from, right? Because there's probably never going to be a point where we can analyze that. So why don't we focus on the things that actually matter in the real world? Like, how are we going to eat? How are we going to survive? Right? How are we going to, make the world a better place? So I was putting up these Medium entries, and some people had said like, "Oh, this would be really cool in book format." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. I should do that." So I took down all of the things, put them into one package, and I started posting online saying, "I'm going to be writing a book. If anyone has any ideas, things they want to, see in the book, or if they have stories from when we were children and things like that." And somebody reached out to me who I didn't recognize the name, but she said, "You won't recognize me because I'm using a pen name, but I'm actually an author and I grew up with you and you helped me when I was younger." And I did find out who it is, but I can't give it away. But it was a friend of my sister's, and she said, "I'll edit it for free." And I'm like, "Well, I can't argue with free."
That's nice.
Yeah. So then she took all this stuff and she read through it, and I was expecting an answer back like, "You were amazing, you're a genius," and all this stuff, right? And she wrote back and said, "You kind of missed the mark here." And I'm like, "What?" It's like devastating. She's like, "It's really good. There's a heartfelt message here, and there's a lot of, good things, but there's just no real theme, like term or theme that's tying everything together." And I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not an author then. I'm not going to bother with this. And I kind of shelved it for a while. And then I was doing a podcast for Humanist Canada, and they were asking for a segment that was something to do with what I've been working on. And I said, "Okay, well, what about like humanism? It's kind of from the heart, like humanism from the heart." And I'm like, no, never mind. Don't use that as a segment. I'm using that as my book title. And then so when I put that down on paper, I was like, okay, well, this is the theme. The theme is going to be all about the heart-centered aspect of humanity, right? And then I was like, what else am I trying to accomplish? Well, I'm trying to build bridges. So what I say, it's like building bridges beyond belief, because I could use the alliteration. And I'm like, okay, now that I got the title, I was able to tweak all the stories that I had already come up with, drop some of them, write new ones, and just add, quotes from different people throughout history that would kind of tie the chapters together. And I'm like, hopefully this is going to be enough to get past that hurdle of being devastated that the book wasn't very good. And so when I gave it back to her, she's like, okay, yeah, you nailed it. Like this is actually something worth putting out there now. So then I was actually like, phew, like it was a huge relief. And I was really happy with the result at the end. And I'm actually looking back at the old version of it now. I'm like, this is kind of embarrassing. So I started pulling them all down off of Medium, because they were all like nice individual stories, but it really wasn't telling a cohesive narrative. So I'm really happy with the way it turned out.
That's awesome.
I'm curious because you've been doing quite a few podcasts on the book. I know it's been out in the world for a while. And I'm just curious if there's been anything sort of surprising or particularly noteworthy about kind of the responses you've gotten. Like once you see it go out, what kind of impact has it had?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there has been a few things that have kind of made me like shake my head or like my head's like exploded, where like it's really had an impact on people. And this is kind of what like my core demographic when I was aiming at was the people who are progressive and religious. Because I'm trying to get people to understand that we can still disagree and have these great conversations and find common ground. And the shared values are the most important thing that we have. And so I actually had quite a few people reach out to me that are religious, and not just Christian. I'm talking like Muslims as well, that say that they really appreciate the message of the book, even though we completely disagree on theology. So that's a really cool thing to have. There's even reviews. Like if you go on and see one of the reviews, one of the reviews was hilarious. It was 2 stars, and it said it was something about it being a really good book, and I would give it more stars except for this author is an atheist, and put it in like capital letters. And it's like he's trying to bring it away from God, but also he said really nice things about Christianity. So it's kind of funny. But yeah, I'm getting a lot of like really good reviews, and it's won a couple of awards. I got I was a finalist for the American Writing Awards for social change, which I thought is a huge thing, huge accomplishment for like social change being a thing that's what we're trying to impact is trying to bridge that gap between people. So I think that was a really good achievement. And then I also got top pick for author shouts. So that was kind of cool too. So just a couple of awards and a lot of input from people saying that they are getting something from it. I've had people messaging me saying, my sister-in-law last week told me I was going to hell, and all of a sudden she's inviting me to dinner because I've been using the techniques. Yeah. So using the techniques that you've been talking about in the book and things like that.
That's great.
So really cool things, real world impact from my words is it's really touching to hear that.
And that's like mission critical right now is to build, in general, to build the broadest possible coalition. Like, I don't know if you've heard, but America is a train wreck right now. and it's been very interesting because right now we have this all hands on deck situation where we're facing these huge problems. And so many people are affected by these issues that are caused by a vanishingly small percentage of the population. And in the efforts, I think, we've talked about this in the past, but in the efforts to try to pit us against each other, I feel like, in a sense, those bad actors have overplayed their hand. And now you have you have politicians like James Tallarico, we were just talking about this last night, who is so just outwardly Christian, and Pete Buttigieg, who's so outwardly Christian. And they're different flavors of Christianity. We're not Christian, but at the same time, I would count them in our coalition without a second thought, because again, it comes back to humanism. Like, our values align regardless of where we think those values come from or what we see those values in service of in some sort of metaphysical sense. the values are what drive the actions, and our actions are perpetually in alignment, it seems. So we gotta find all the ways to repair relationships, with our MAGA neighbors who have become disillusioned. I see more and more people who are apologizing for their votes. Or, we've started watching the show a little bit here and there called We're Here, which is about 3 drag queens who go to more conservative areas and help, build up the queer community in various ways. And, the first episode was a mom who was on this apology crusade to her daughter, who back when the mom was hyper religious, she demonized her daughter and her daughter left, and she feels utter regret, but at the same time knows that she did wrong. And those are the people that we have to recognize as being yeah, you made a mistake, but we all make mistakes, and your mistakes shouldn't be deal breakers to us reforming a bridge and making the whole community stronger as a result. I think it does us personally as a disservice to turn our backs on those people, because if the roles were reversed, we would appreciate that grace.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do make mistakes. Like I said, I had a really bad, rocky relationship after I came out as an angry atheist and was ridiculing people's beliefs and, putting people down really badly. And, I, I had to come back from that. And, just the grace on both sides to be able to admit when you do something wrong and try and find a path to rectify those wrongs, I think is a very admirable thing.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the Friendly Ape Theist on Facebook?
Yeah.
I won't say his name because he doesn't use his name anymore.
Yeah.
But I met him back when I used to be in the sort of those early Facebook debate groups, back when I was an angry atheist, and I was just I was such a jackass. But he was the first voice of agreeing with me on literally every point while also being more biblically literate and also not denigrating people and being kinder through his entire process. And he was the first person I met where I was oh, I don't have to do this thing as a reaction to feeling like I'd been lied to for so many years. And it was the first moment where I felt like I aimed a mirror at myself and my behavior. And it was all because of his empathy. It was such a powerful moment. And so we need people like that. In the past, I haven't talked to him about it recently, only because, he doesn't go by that name anymore, and it's just I try to respect where he's at in wanting to do more public debates and sort of changing his brand a bit.
Yeah, for sure. But he's also in an interfaith relationship. So,
yeah, for sure. Very interestingly.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a driving force for a lot of us. Even Seth Andrews is in an interfaith relationship as well. So a lot of the things that he talks about are about shared values as well, just because he also is sharing his life with a Christian. There's quite a lot of us. I mean, even Dale McGowan, his wife was a Christian at the time where he was writing books about interfaith and raising children in interfaith households and things. And since then, his wife has become an atheist. But it's just, the ability for us to kind of peek behind the curtain. We kind of have the advantage of seeing what it looks like in practice when you have to interact with somebody on a relationship level, whether that's a romantic relationship or even just a platonic relationship, but just having somebody in your family who disagrees with you on what I call the small things. Because again, when we talk about the universe, where the universe came from, nobody knows, right? Is there a supernatural element? Nobody knows, right?
The small things, investigate,
Yeah, the small things. But the bigger things, I think, are whether or not we or the shared values we have. Because what if we're living in the Matrix? It doesn't really matter where we are. What reality is. We have to deal with the reality that we can see and touch and taste and feel and talk to. So I find that it's a nice, it's kind of an advantage to have an interfaith person in your family, somebody in your family who thinks differently than you. So you're not also in that echo chamber that it seems to be a dangerous place as well.
Yeah. And earlier in my deconstruction, I didn't value, this was also because I was really, again, angry and like inward about it, but I didn't value the power that I could have in another person's life. So like I was only seeing, oh, there are these people who disagree with me. I'm fine. I'm taking value from them, but I discounted my ability to add value and perhaps change somebody else's opinion about non-believers. That was a huge missed opportunity on my part for years. And like since changing my tune about myself, now I can be of service more. And that's like, we can't look past these like opportunities that we have as non-believers to demonstrate the convergence of values. And that is not just about, where you ascribe the value to, or, where you think your morals are grounded in. None of that matters in the long run.
Yeah. And I had a podcast recently called The Irrational Podcast where I went on with a Christian apologist. And, there's a part where the host was asking us to, give an account for who we think that Jesus was, right? So I kind of reached across the table and I said, well, I'm pretty sure that Jesus was probably a real person, or at least based on a real person, or based on multiple people, but most likely one person that all these stories are attributed to. And then I, happen to say, I don't think that a lot of the stories that were attributed to him actually happened in reality. I said, but there's probably basis to, accepting him as a human being in a historical way. And I think that if we do things like that, where we can reach across and just give a little bit to say, like, I understand how you can think this. And I understand that this is a very important figure and symbol for you, where it's not really for me, but at the same time, I can respect and show you that I accept where you're coming from.
Sure.
And I think that went a long way in that conversation. And then a lot of the comments you get on these videos is people are either like, oh, you're going to burn in hell because Jesus is real and he doesn't like that you didn't say that he's supernatural. And then you get other people that are like, well, Jesus totally didn't exist, so you're such a moron for thinking that, whatever. And what I try and do in these conversations with people online and in just a comment section is just point out the fact that, like, when we talk about the historicity of something, we just grant it for the most part. If it's a mundane fact from history, whatever, you know what I mean? Yeah. Now, the bigger question is, who was this person when it comes to the supernatural elements? And since there's no evidence based in reality, no empirical evidence for any of these things happening, I'm not going to grant that. But I have no qualms granting that there was somebody who was stirring up things back in that time and died for it, right? Yeah. So I just think that that's one of the things that we can do is we can dip into somebody else's reality and into their stories to kind of bridge the gap and show that we do have some type of understanding and acceptance of where they're coming from.
So you're saying that we shouldn't believe that Alexander the Great was actually the son of Zeus?
I mean, don't take that one from me.
No, but it's really interesting. I think, and it comes down to empathy. I've gotten into, as moms will point out, much to probably her dismay, I've gotten into watching certain YouTube channels that are primarily focused on philosophical and theological debate. And one of them, allegedly Ian, talks about how he has a long history of debate experience and how important it is for empathy to be the starting point of debate. Because in order to actually engage with a person's points, you have to steelman their argument. You have to understand their argument sometimes better than they do. And you have to put your hat on. And so that's what, like again, going back to the angry atheist thing, like I was devoid of empathy. And it basically hamstrung every opportunity I might have otherwise had to find common ground. And it's just a simple act of just like calming it down and just actually listening to the person. And it works in the political side of things now so much, again, because so many right-leaning voters from last election are having second thoughts. And you see this in polls, but you also see this in like rubber meets the road, like these off-cycle elections that are swinging wildly away from what we would expect based on what Trump was elected by in those districts. So if we extend empathy, then we're probably going to get a result that we would find more desirable. But we have to put it out there first. We have to like open the door for them and keep it open even when they're shouting at us and venting and being angry like we used to be.
Mm-hmm. And if you're anything like me, you're probably shouting out at caricatures of the other side.
Yes.
Right. Where it's not even like the real person that you're trying to connect with and be angry at. It's more of a caricature. And I can't remember who pointed this out. I think it was Dale McGowan pointed out that like when people who are atheists think of Christian, you think of someone like Kenneth Copeland, who's like just like, lizard person, right?
That smile.
It's like, it's
the creepiest thing.
Oh, geez. And those eyes.
I'm waiting for him to eat a parakeet live on stage.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
Lick his lips with like a 5-foot long tongue all the way around his head.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's totally what I see too.
Can I bring that back to the book for a second?
Sure.
Because there's one chapter I want to talk about. Because I mean, one thing I really enjoyed about the book is how much you talk about your kids. And there's this great chapter about your son and being at an event and there was a blind person there. And it's a great story. And I'll leave it for people to enjoy. Yes. But the long and the short of it is that he wants to ask that person a question. And I think you're assuming it's going to be something about being blind. Right? Because that's like the most obvious thing about him. And your son ends up asking a completely unrelated question, which draws out this amazing story about his life. And the chapter is kind of framed in terms of speaking about kindness. And what I found was so interesting about that chapter is like, I mean, I don't know your kid and I wasn't there. He could have totally been doing that to be kind. But to me, I think with kids, like the way I read it, I was like, oh, he was just curious. And he was curious in a way that as adults, we often get locked off from.
Right. No, that's totally true. Yeah. And I think it's Dale McGowan too, who says that curiosity is like the one thing he would imbue his children with, because curiosity leads to so many different things like kindness and empathy, right? Because if you're curious about somebody, you're going to ask them questions about their deeply held beliefs or even just what it is that they have preferences on. And then you're going to understand the person better. And that's, I'm kind of using curiosity as kind of like a jump off point. So when I write the sequel for this book, I've actually come up with something I've been shopping around when I do my presentations, and it's almost like a new way of understanding conversations. And I call it the three mutuals, or the mutual triangle. And the first one is actually mutual acceptance, mutual understanding. So if you can understand where someone's coming from, right? If you ask them questions to get at the heart of what it is that they understand, or what they believe, and you can fully understand where they're coming from, and then you can mirror that so they can ask you the same types of questions to get to that understanding of where you're coming from, then that's the first step. And that would be starting to build towards a mutual acceptance, because then you can accept the person for who they are, whether or not they believe the same thing that you do, right? And I got to put a caveat on all of this, that anything that's a harmful idea is obviously not going to be acceptable, right? We're not going to accept someone's harmful ideas, but we can accept the reasons why they believe what they believe.
Yes.
And if we can get to that acceptance, then we can get to the respect, right? If you can actually fully respect somebody, regardless of what their beliefs are, again, not harmful beliefs, but if it's something that is, a mundane or ordinary type of belief system where they just, believe in a higher power for whatever reason they have, if we can get the understanding, the acceptance, and the respect, and the key word being mutual, then I think that that's like a really good basis for having a really solid relationship with someone.
Do you watch the YouTube channel More Perfect Union? I know it's America centric, but I'm just curious.
No, I've never even heard of it before.
You should check it out. So, there's enough. We used to live not in America, as you might know, but there's enough similarity between Canada and the U.S. that I think it might hit home. And the best part about More Perfect Union is that it is independent journalism. And a lot of their videos are interviews at public events where you might be surprised to get the answers that you get, the responses that you get. Like in, they did this whole thing, I think it was in West Virginia, where you would expect it to be like diehard Trump country, but it used to be super democratic. And you talk to the people and you see how so much of their swing to the right was due to economic concerns, the collapse of the coal industry and not having good economic answers for that loss of industry. And that fear making them embrace authoritarian rhetoric, which of course preys on people's fears, right? Doesn't matter what country you're in. And so then you see these interviews with these people, and I can't help but like have my heart break for them, because they were making the choice that they thought they needed to make to protect their families and their kids' futures. But their motivation is the same motivation that I would have. It's like, in that regard, like we're one and the same, but for the fact that our circumstances maybe like would dictate that we would be more disposed to vote for this person we might in past times find totally distasteful. So we have to start from that position of, okay, let them vent, listen to them. We might really be surprised with the common ground that we actually have.
Yeah, for sure. And that reminds me of like the Lion King, right? Because Scar, he goes to the hyenas and he says, "Stick with me and you'll never go hungry again." Right?
Oh,
it's like the type of message.
You'll never have to vote again.
Yeah. Things like that, where it's like, people are, suffering and struggling and they want a way out of that. And they take the opportunity to ride on someone's coattails that may be promising them, redemption or a way to get out of that. And part of the presentations I do recently, especially because I added the political aspect to it too, having cordial conversations with politics involved. And one of the things is, like, instead of saying accusatory things, something like along the lines of like, why you support a criminal?
Yeah.
Right. You can say something like, is there something about this person's policies that you appreciate?
What is it?
What is it about, their platform that you actually are voting for? Because if you just assume that they're voting on them based on the person and thinking like, oh, they're just following this idiot, it might be about a certain thing, like one of the policies that you're mentioning, right? Like something like getting somebody out of poverty or gas prices coming down or something, right? A lot of people have motivation that is about themselves and their family and just personal protection. So.
Yeah, I mean, even beyond that, Pops is really into the debate channels, and I checked out of that a little bit. And really, the reason is that chapter in your book we discussed. Because whenever I'm listening, they'll be going at it about some topic. And I'm always like, I don't think that's the question. Like, I know I was listening over Pops' shoulder to some guy doing a whole thing about how women should be subservient and all this stuff. And I was just like, did you get broken up with?
Yeah.
Like, I feel in the deepest of my heart that like you had a relationship end and you feel like if she had been more subservient, it would have continued and you wouldn't be lonely right now, which is like not the right response to that situation. That is like a really messed up, but like, I could just like see it play out. So I'm always like, when did you start listening to these people? Like what was going, But I have to ask a question that's very selfish, because I know a lot of what you're doing is sort of reaching out to people that are maybe on like a slightly different political side or religious folks. I'm really interested in people who are secular, but kind of, what did you say what you were when you like just didn't care? It was a great word.
Apatheist.
Yeah.
You've never heard that before?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So like
it's a mix of the terms apathy and theism. Right?
Yeah.
You don't believe, but you don't care.
Like that is the group that I am really interested in. Because I feel like
there's actually a Facebook group for that now.
You should join, Moms.
You should.
I will.
I'm actually part of it too, because I like to stay in that 1 foot in that world as well.
Oh, I gotta look. But, because I feel like, I don't know. I see a lot of people in that community, and like particularly where we're coming from as parents, it's like the people where it's like, well, I'm apatheist, but, now I have kids. I kind of don't know how to work about that. So maybe I'll start going back to church because like that's where I grew up.
Comfort.
Right.
And like, that's a community I really kind of want to create like a potentially cool space for.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if you have any thoughts, because I feel like when it comes to humanism, like when you give that description, there are so many people, I feel like, where if they heard that, they'd be like, yeah, that's me, right?
Yeah.
But I don't feel like humanist communities are necessarily reaching that broad audience. And I didn't know if you had any ideas about like why that is or what you think we could be doing better.
Yeah, that's a really hard question because I was on the board with Sunday Assembly. Just trying to analyze these things, like, why are there not more people that were previously in religious communities that are now non-religious, but they don't seem to want to migrate over. And I think there might be a couple reasons for that. One might be trauma, where they feel like maybe they don't want to be part of a community anymore because if community is like this over here, which I've experienced, I don't want to experience that anymore.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
There's also people who never came from a religion, or if they did, maybe the community aspect wasn't actually something that they enjoyed, right? Because there's a lot of people, especially atheists, that are very self-reliant. They don't really need to have a community, or they feel like they don't need to have a community, and they'd rather just be focused on science or something that's like a solitary investigation or practice or something. But yeah, like, I mean, that's a really hard question. And I do feel like they're doing a good job. It's just the word isn't getting out enough. And I think that's the biggest thing, because when Sunday Assembly first started, it was a couple comedians in the UK, and they put out an ad in the paper, and it was like 200 people showed up for the very first one. So it's like, I think maybe just the lack of advertisement. And then I think too, when you hear like, this isn't a secular organization, people are thinking like, oh, that means anti-religious, when really all it means is that it's leaving religion off the table.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like, Sunday Assembly and Oasis, like those types of groups are amazing. Even there's other ones, I think there's like the ethical societies and things, right? It's just like a place for people to go to have community and share fellowship, but not have the supernatural elements there. And I think that is an important thing. I think it's a really good thing. And I just think that with religions having a monopoly on communities for so long, and having the funding too, because part of these organizations, it's like we have to fund them ourselves if we want them to work. Whereas like, churches and stuff, they have like the archdiocese that's pumping money into them, and they are able to continue. Like, sure, we have the tax-free status, but it doesn't really help us if we don't have the money in the first place.
Right.
So a lot of different things, right? If we had the advertising budget, maybe if the messaging was different, if we were to say like, it welcomes everybody regardless of what you believe. But then you have to be careful too, because if you say that, then you can get people who are like gun nuts that want to come and they're like, well, I have a right to have my gun here with me and whatever, right? Like you never know what you're going to get. And when you have a church, you have a set of doctrine or dogma where it's like, these are the things that we accept. And then when you have a secular organization, it's like, well, we accept all except for violence and hate and this kind of thing. So it's like, it's really difficult to lay out what that would be, I think, on a grand scale. But no, it's a really good question. And it's something that we've been struggling with for a long time. But then there's organizations like Recovering from Religion, where we have support groups, right? So instead of having like a church, it's like you have a support group. So you get a bunch of people together, they talk about their issues. And then we have, once a year, we have the Fall Excursion, which is everybody goes to somewhere, like I think it's at Pigeon Forge, Tennessee this year. Everyone's going to get together and like stay in a cabin together and hang out and stuff. But it's just doing something on a regular basis is difficult, especially when you don't have the funding. And I think that's kind of the struggle, is funding for advertisement, funding for programs. And just, if you don't have the people, you can't make it happen, but you can't make it happen without the people. Like it's kind of like a cycle, right? Like you need to have an infrastructure, you need to have the people there willing to put it together and the funding. But it's a big struggle. All that to say, it's a struggle.
Yeah. And I guess like with the talks you're doing now, with that sort of bigger framework of building better conversations, like where do you hope that goes? Because that feels like that's way beyond the humanist community. That feels like a much bigger project.
Yeah, it is. And I think we owe a lot to the new atheists, like the four horsemen of new atheism. But I think that we've kind of moved beyond that now, where we need to be more heart-centered.
Yes.
And I think that by having more like cordial conversations with people across the different divides, I think that's how we're going to bridge those gaps and be able to create better community that's able to withstand more external pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's what I'm trying to build is having cordial conversations to find the shared values that we have, as opposed to looking for the differences. If we can look for the similarities and use those to branch out and become a big conglomerate of people that have the same heart-centered values, then I think that's kind of like the goal.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, that impatience, I think that's baked into new atheism, I think has really run its course. Like, and by impatience,
it was hopeful.
It was absolutely like being short and blunt and unforgiving to like theistic opposition. I think at the time was really necessary just to like crack the door open. But what's going to open the door further and keep the door open isn't like one brash person. It's going to be like an army of people who just want to keep the door open.
Yeah.
And
I think what you mentioned before, it was missing the empathy.
Yeah.
So now we have the empathy factor.
Yeah.
Right. And, and I feel like with this whole dark arts approach to certain people who were doing interviews on the streets and things like that, I don't want to mention names, but like people who, go out there and use their platform in a negative way to kind of say empathy is a bad thing. I think that's kind of run its course to the point where people have kind of understood from the inside now that may not be the best way to focus on humans coming together, right? Yeah. So I think that now we're on the other side of that, and I think empathy is making a comeback. And I think that empathy is going to be the driving force behind this new movement that we're creating. And I'm not sure what the movement is yet, but I know it's not new atheism, and it's definitely empathy focused.
I hope so. So, Steve, if people want to keep following you, get the book, hear about the new book when it comes out.
Sure.
You're doing stuff all the time. It's amazing. What is the best
busy guy?
What is the best way to keep up with you?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Facebook is probably like the main area where I put all the things that are happening. People follow me on there a lot, so I think that's one of the more active things. I do have an Instagram. It's not as active. They are linked, but sometimes when I post things on Facebook, it doesn't go automatically to Instagram. So I think Facebook's the main area. I do have a website. It's just my name, stevegikadis.com, where I post a lot of the things that I have going on. I just finished up a contest for people to win a pair of books because it was a 1-year anniversary of my book was released on the 23rd of March.
Congrats! I thought it was just about a year, but I didn't know. That's amazing.
So I released on World Atheist Day, which is kind of funny.
That's cool.
And I released the audiobook on World Humanist Day. So.
And
I did the audiobook myself, and I said I'm the Timu version of Seth Andrews. And I have the Canadian accent too. So
you should have put on like a fake Oklahoma accent.
Yeah, that'd be so funny. So website. I did have that contest, and someone in Norway actually won a pair of books. So I sent that to Norway, which is really cool. Different places of the world are actually getting involved in this movement, whatever it is that we're building. So it's exciting, and the sequel is going to be called Humanism at Hand: Practical Principles for Peaceful Partnerships. I'm keeping up that alliteration, but it's going to be, mostly about the hands-on, because people have been asking me, okay, now I understand the why. Why did you do this, and where did you come from on this, and how is this working? And then they more want of like the what. What can we do? Like, how are we going to make this happen on the ground level? And that's what this book is going to be focused on, is actually building those connections and getting your foot in the door to have better conversations.
I can't wait to read that. Do you have any idea of approximately when it's going to come out, or is that still up in the air?
I'm planning on having it released next year, but I guess it's all going to depend on whether or not I can get it all done. I've been scrapping things and then adding things and scrapping things again. It's just kind of a process, and once I figure out what I really want to say, then I think that's when I'll be like, okay, all the pieces will fall in place, and it'll be a lot faster at that point. So hopefully 2027, but can't make any promises.
I hear you. Well, we'll be looking for it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This has been awesome.
Okay, so this was so funny that this happened right after we spoke with Steve and decided to do this interview. Jaeger is turning 10 very soon. And he got his big birthday gift early, which is a
flamethrower. It's like Calvin and Hobbes. He always wanted a flamethrower, finally got one.
Well, what he actually got was a computer. And it was kind of a big deal because Reader got a computer. Was it for their 11th or for the...
Yes.
Okay, for their 11th birthday. And so we had kind of been thinking to do the same timing for Jaeger. But we talked about it, and just based on his interests, there are so many...
Most
games that he is interested in, you really need a PC to play.
Well, no, you need a PC to play.
Yeah. So we realized that waiting for this parody was like not really making sense anymore. And so we got him a computer, and it was charming because he had no idea it was coming, I think, right?
Oh, no. He was completely shocked.
Yeah. And so
it was wonderful.
Yeah. Very excited. I mean, this kid, the kind of games he's playing, like all of the rocket telemetry, is that how you say it?
The rocketry games?
Yeah.
Like Kerbal Space Program. Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah.
They're just...
Very cool.
Like, the fact that he just wants to sit and like try to get rockets into orbit or to land on certain spaces.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. But the other game that we were like, man, when this kid gets a taste of civilization, he's going to lose his mind. And
he did.
He did. Pops, for those who aren't familiar with Civilization, do you want to explain what the game is?
Sure. In brief, it's a turn-based game. So you have a turn, and then the other cultures have a turn, but where you pick a culture and that has like an iconic leader from history, and you start at 4000 BC, and you can change how long the game is, or it goes from like hundreds of turns to thousands of turns, and you go all the way up from 4000 BC to 2100 AD or whatever. And through the course of time, you develop relationships with the other cultures in the game world, and you can fight with them or trade with them, and you build great wonders. There's so much to juggle that it's very impressive how well Jaeger is doing with it.
And so he's been playing it a lot. And yesterday, he came into my room and he's like, "Mom, I just invented humanism." What is that?
Pretty good. Pretty good. It's pretty good.
So I did not know that was even part of the game. Way to go, Civilization. But I was like, funny, you should mention it. We consider ourselves humanists. And he's like,
we just had a big conversation with Steve about this.
Yeah. We just had an interview about it. And he's like, oh, so it's atheism? And I was like, no. Interestingly, it's more a philosophy. And we just interviewed somebody who believes you can be a Christian humanist if you believe in all aspects of that. And then I pulled up a definition because it is, like I told Steve, they're all a bit different and it can be hard to capture everything. And so I read him the definition and he's like, oh, everything good. And I was like, yep, basically. And he's like, okay, got it. And went back to playing his game. But I don't know. I just thought that was too much. And on the same day, he learned that coffee is a resource. So he basically, the two things I love best wound up in Civilization in the same day for him.
Yeah.
So that just made me very, very happy. And I feel like it proves my point that, when people know what humanism contains, they're just like, oh, all that logical stuff. And it's like, pretty much. So, but that's cool. Hey, I know it's been a long time since you've played. How big a part does religion play in the game?
Last game I played was Civ 4, and you develop it as it's very broad. The type of like cultural philosophies that you choose. And religiosity is one of them, but it doesn't, you don't like drill down on it. But I think Jaeger was receiving like Hindu missionaries from other civilizations. And I was like, wow, okay, it's a lot more granular.
Yeah.
Because this is Civ 6.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of years passed in development between Civ 4 and Civ 6. These games don't happen very often. So the updates tend to be very big, where the games can be very different from one to the next. But I really like what I see of this game. And so I might have to start my own.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. It could lead to other interesting discussions.
True.
But I'm glad we got to talk about it. I'm kind of shocked we brought it up before and it just, went out of his mind, but I'm glad it was an opportunity to talk about it, and it was just too perfect. All right. Should we end it there?
Yeah.
As always, we have to thank Jonathan Zalbin and First Frame Music for the music for this podcast.
And that ends this episode of The Family Skeptical, where nothing is sacred
except for our kids.
You got this Kim Novak thing going on right now with the lighting.
I know. Oh,
Vaseline on the lens.
It's probably just because my computer screen's always dirty, which should surprise you not at all.